All right, so here we go. So it's raise more money, reach more hearts. This is about appeal letters. You can, yep, let's enable those live transcriptions. Thank you, Katie. You can get in touch with BNRC on Twitter at BNRC Land Trust, and you can get in touch with me on Twitter at Rich Montone. And I'm the Director of Development at Berkshire Natural Resources Council. So the title was Raise More Money, Reach More Hearts. But really the point of this session is to walk through one of BNRC's appeal packages, direct mail appeal packages, and talk about the way that it's designed to actually reach more hearts and raise more money. I've long thought that raising money is the residual result of doing other things well, of doing relationships well. I always tell my colleagues on the Berkshire Natural Resources Council staff, when people call into the office and they get a land conservation officer and they have an excellent experience conserving land with our land trust, when they're out on the trails and the trails are well maintained, there's great wayfinding, when the properties are taken care of really well, that sort of stewardship influences people's experience of the outdoors in general and of the BNRC Land Trust in particular. The outreach programs, the free guided hikes, the work in schools, the way that that's executed and the way that people experience that, that is an experience that enables people to know how BNRC is both serving them and listening to them. And when donors give to Berkshire Natural Resources Council, the way that they're thanked and stewarded as donors matters in their experience with the organization. And all of these, the conservation, the stewardship, the volunteer, the community outreach, all of this contributes to people having a certain experience with the org, and then the residual result is money raised. One of my fundraising mentors said, think about it as a campfire. All this other stuff you do, the relationships and the conservation and the volunteer outreach, all of that is the fire. And then the actual dollars that flow to your organization is the ash. So we've really structured all of our conversation, all of our appeal mechanisms at BNRC around doing really great communications work, making sure that we make the ask because you have to make the ask, but understanding that relationships come first and the money flows later. So even in appeal letters, which seem like it's one person writing to the masses, we're always striving for a one-to-one relationship with the person that's reading the letter. We try to write that way, and we try to create space in the letter for the reader to experience the letter in that way. And to the greatest degree that we can, we always try to show people that we know who they are, even in appeal letters on an individual basis to the greatest degree possible. Because in a perfect world, we would relate to every single donor in a one-to-one way. But, of course, we can't do that when, Berkshire Natural Resources Council has about 1,500, 1,600 donors a year. We don't have the ability to be in touch with every single one of them, but we try to relate in a really personal way that feels like one-on-one in the way that we structure our appeal packages. So how we do that is we try to listen. Even in writing, we try to listen. We ask a lot of questions and just leave them hanging out there in our appeal packages. It doesn't matter to us that we are not there with the reader when they're reading the letter to hear their answer to the question. We just think it's important to ask the question in print because the reader is still going to appreciate being asked as they read the letter. And whether they realize it or not, the reader is going to answer that question that we're asking in the letter in their own mind. And that's good enough for us. So, you've all heard the art and the science of fundraising before. So a lot of this presentation is about what's the art and what's the science of these appeal letters, and what's the art and what's the science of relationships. So, part of the art is telling stories. And so rather than naming facts, we really try to tell stories in our appeal packages. We try to tell stories about people. We try to tell stories about places, about food, about wildlife. We try to tell stories about the reader themselves and their role in the organization. And I think that all of this makes unrestricted giving easier. Berkshire Natural Resources Council raises a lot of money through appeal letters for unrestricted giving. And people have commented to me over the years. They've been like, oh, the hard thing about unrestricted funds is they're so difficult to raise. But I think if the content of the letters and the content of your communications is focusing on outcomes, rather than talking about operational things, then an unrestricted giving ask does really well. And it's not, the outcomes aren't untrue, like the outcomes are very true. So I focus on those rather focusing on the operational things that make the outcomes possible, because without the operational things, you wouldn't have the outcomes. So I just focus on the outcomes. I don't talk too much, we don't talk too much at BNRC in our appeal letter packages about things like acres and bridges installed and new parking areas, or even internal organizational goals. Like I might know Berkshire Natural Resources Council is about a $1.5 to $2 million a year annual budget organization. About $900,000 or almost $1 million of that is raised from individual donations. But like, I know what the goals are internally. I know that we've got to get to about $900K, $1 million in individual donations, but I don't need to browbeat BNRC supporters with those stats. Like that's what we need to achieve internally, but the outcomes is what I'm trying to achieve with the community. And so I really keep the focus there. And then the science, is design, and we'll go through an appeal package and I'll show you some design choices that BNRC has made to really try and create the kind of response and experience of the appeal packages that we're after. There are design choices that can be made in the envelope, in the letter, in the reply device, in the reply methods, adding a buck slip. The design to these things can really affect the success of an appeal letter a lot in our experience. Now, I just want to be clear, because there's organizations that have smaller budgets than BNRC, the same budget as BNRC, and organizations that have way bigger budgets than BNRC. Design doesn't necessarily mean fancy. It's just designed to function. Like, how do you want it to function? And in a moment, we're going to walk through each of these pieces: the envelope, the letter, the reply device, the reply methods, and I'll point some of these design features out. You'll see that they're not fancy. The design work isn't going to blow you away in terms of how beautiful it is, but it's just really functional. And then another thing that I mentioned about appeals before we hop into the nuts and bolts thing is I encourage organizations to have an appeal piece in the mail about 6 times a year, if you can. Because of staffing, because of available funds, maybe 6 times isn't going to be possible for you. But we at Berkshire Natural Resources Council do 4 versions of an appeal letter. 2 of them are pretty straight ahead appeal packages, and that's what we're going to look at today. One is something more what we call like a newsy letter, where it's intentionally a little more newsy, but it does come in letter form. And then 2 of them come in the form of a mini magazine that has a lot of messaging about giving threaded all the way through it. So, we think of the year in 6 chunks. We design 6 little drives, and the anchor of those drives is the direct mail piece that goes in the mail, and all of the supports that help that appeal piece do really well. And we'll talk about those supports at the very end of this slide deck. So hopping right into it, here is a recent BNRC number 10 mailing envelope that we use. Obviously, it's the front. And the first thing that we do is we always, down in the right-hand corner there, we try to tell people what the whole appeal says in 2 lines. This gives the recipient some reason to open the kind of envelope that we choose, because we use a number 10 envelope. Maybe you don't use a number 10, maybe you use something that is well honed to getting people to open the envelope. But this particular appeal was about telling people about the things specifically that they could do for the Berkshires that season. And we had a hat incentive. People could either get a knit hat or a baseball cap for making a gift in this particular drive. So we put that in those 2 lines, and we thought to ourselves, that's pretty much everything we're telling these people in this letter, and that's why we want them to open this envelope. And then another thing that we've had a lot of success with at Berkshire Natural Resources Council, partly because of bandwidth and having fewer staff than our ideas would warrant, right? We can always think way beyond what we can actually do. Is a lot of times we send first class. We send first class if we get in trouble, but first class pre-sort, if you don't know about it, I think is a really great way to send mail. especially for an organization that operates in the $1.5 to $2 million budget or less, because in many cases, the raw cost of doing first class pre-sort, which is cheaper than first class because you've pre-sorted the letters according to zip code, it might cost you, $500 to bulk it and like $850 to first class it. So, it might be a big percentage difference, but if it's only the difference of $350, like one gift is going to cover that. And if it's like, November 15th, and you're like, I got to get this thing out so it hits right after Thanksgiving, and days are crucial, first class pre-sort is a really handy way to get the package in front of people in a timely way so they can respond on the timeline you want them to respond on. And then, I try to use color whenever possible. I think about, in the realm of it takes an apple a day to keep the doctor away, I think of fundraising as a 5-to-1 proposition. Whatever I'm spending, I generally want to get 5 times more back. And so I don't mind spending on color if I think an appeal is going to yield 5 times its total cost. And when you get into little segments of a development shop, like a major gifts operation should have a much bigger return, right? Like it should be 10-to-1 or 15-to-1. And like a gala event is going to have a much tighter ratio. Like a gala event, because there's so much overhead, is going to be like 3-to-1, sometimes 2-to-1 if you're just getting it going. But a real nice place to be on appeal letters, I think, is 5-to-1. I would argue with people who would say, hey, Rich, you're spending too much on this appeal. I would say if you're spending like, if you're only getting 3-to-1 on your appeals, like maybe you're spending too much on your appeals. But if you're getting like 8-to-1 on your appeals, maybe you're not sending your appeal to as many people as it can go to. What I'm trying to say there is like, if you're not investing 20% back in the operation, maybe you're not investing enough, because the more people you reach, the more money you're going to raise. So on the back of the envelope, I think that this is a really great and overlooked place to use. Use the back of the envelope. We always put this picture grid here and this string of words. So this is not random, like we're trying to tell a story here, right? And we always choose the pictures according to this formula. There's a user, there's a shot of wildlife, there's a close-up of something, and then there's a landscape. Because we want people to have both the close-up and the depth of landscape, but the landscape sort of speaks to the breadth of the BNRC mission, while the close-up in this case speaks to, this is the way that you can use the properties. The wildlife signifies that we're about wildlife, and the user picture enables someone to imagine themselves in place using the properties and making use of the information we're going to tell them inside. We always make this seasonal, so every season we change up these pictures so they're seasonally relevant. And then at the bottom here, I call this Zen poeming your vision. So these are just a string of words that are just bullets on what BNRC does: forests, fields, farms, food, wetlands, water, wildlife, wellness, towns, trails, together. In however many words that is, I think that that's BNRC in a nutshell. And with the 2 phrases in the bottom right-hand corner on the front, and with these pictures and these words, you've already told people a lot about what you're trying to communicate with them. A lot of times I source the pictures from Instagram. I look for people who are hashtagging BNRC content, and that's another way to engage the community in the appeals themselves, so people actually see their own content reflected in the appeals. All right, so that's the envelope. I'll stop there to ask Doug and Jen if there are questions in the chat, because as I do this, I'm not seeing the chat whiz by.
There are not currently any questions in the chat.
Does anybody have questions or ideas that you want to share about your own work with appeal envelopes before we move on into the letter?
Hey, Rich, we actually had one pop up. It's a question from Katie at Hilltown. Do you reach out to individuals on Instagram through direct message?
Yes. Or sometimes I know the person and I have a habit of communicating with them by email, but really whatever makes sense.
Okay, and that also kind of mirrors Lainey's request. Rachel Horgan has a question. Do you have any advice on stamps versus pre-printed indica or indicia? I'm not sure of that.
Yeah. So my personal opinion is if you can do a stamp, go with the stamp. I think it looks nicer. But like, it's also about return on investment. I think if the pictures are on the back, like if that's something you choose to do, if that's within the scope of what you can do, if you've got teaser text on the front, like if your package is doing other things for you and you're like, where can I save some cash? I've got to save some cash on this, go with an indicia. You're trying to just make smart choices about all of the tools that are available to you and build the right sort of cost benefit proposition for yourself. Anybody else, or shall we continue on? All right, going on. So the appeal letter. What I'm showing you here is page 4 of a recent 4-page appeal letter for Berkshire Natural Resources Council. The reason I'm starting with page 4, as many of you may know, is the first thing that most people read in an appeal letter is the signature and the postscript. And so when I'm constructing an appeal letter, I want an ask, an identifiable signer, and a recap of the entire message of the letter to appear in the signature and the PS. And I want people to be able to immediately take action based on only reading the sign off, the signature, and the PS. So that's what's down here. So they can read the PS, and then PPF you can donate anytime, give them the URL, give them a QR code, and give them a way to take action immediately. And then also, we put the photo credits down here at the bottom of the letter, just as another way of helping illustrate that everybody who supports BNRC is part of the organization and that we're sourcing content from the community into our appeals. Up in the body, we try to make sure that we deliver on the promise of those kicker lines, those teaser lines that were on the front envelope. We try to make sure that some of that language is included in the appeal so it all ties together. So we're telling the reader here that joining in this loving task of taking care of the Berkshires is something that only we can do for this special region of the world. At this moment, the Berkshires relies on our care, and it's up to us. Will you help? And then we're also here telling stories about the reader themselves, as I mentioned earlier. We're telling them that as a donor to BNRC, they are someone who makes all of this happen with lasting results. One of the things that irks me about people who ask the question, nonprofit people, we do this to ourselves too. We say things like, well, how much money is going to program? And like, I think that's a unhelpful question to ask ourselves. It's an unhelpful question to people to ask of nonprofits, because I know at Berkshire Natural Resources Council, a lot of the unrestricted funds that get raised wind up going to paying people's salaries. And some people would say that that's overhead, right? That's not going to program, it's going to people's salaries. But if we don't have conservation officers on staff, we're not conserving any land. So, and because BNRC's revenue model is pretty much donations, we don't really have any other revenue stream other than that, and making money on the money that has already been donated to us by investing endowment, right? If we didn't have donors, BNRC actually wouldn't exist. And that ties back to what we're trying to do here. We're trying to illustrate that as a donor to BNRC, you are someone who makes all of this happen. Because if there were no donors, there would be no BNRC, plain and simple. And then we try to also make sure that people know this role within the organization, right? That not only are donors, necessary to even BNRC existing, but that because we have the organization and because we have supporters, we are the people who have to keep our eyes on the pressures of the last couple of years on the trails, on developable wilderness parcels, and so on. We are the people that make this happen. Let the reader know a little bit about themselves and what the reader's role is in the organization. So now, let's say we're lucky enough that the reader went to your first page because they read the fourth page first. So now they come to your first page. So what are some things we try to do on page 1? I really encourage you to write to one person. I wrote here both in science and in art. So, what I mean in terms of writing to one person in science is I do encourage you to use merge fields to write to, dear Jane and Cindy, instead of just having dear friends, or, let people know you're writing directly to them. But then in terms of writing to one person as an art, you may do this too. I have a particular person in mind who is an actual person who is familiar with these issues and will tell me I'm full of crap if I'm writing stuff that sounds like it's full of crap. And that's the person that I write to in these letters. And so when I'm asking questions like, what do you want for the Berkshires? Will you contribute this season? I think of myself asking that one person who's really going to hold me to account to being truthful, honest, transparent. And that's the person that I'm writing to in these letters, so that everybody receiving these letters receives that kind of authenticity. I don't want to write anything in a letter that I wouldn't write to that kind of person in my life. And then I encourage you to play around with embracing the one sentence paragraph. I think one sentence paragraphs are great. They're easier to scan, and they're way easier for people to respond to in their own mind. Like if we segment off right in the middle of that circle there, question first, what do you want for the Berkshires? We've given people to actually receive that question and respond to it in their mind instead of burying that question in a bunch of other words. I think one sentence paragraphs are a lot of fun. And they have a sort of rhythm to them. It sort of becomes like a poem with some meter. I have 2 stories to tell you and a question to ask. Question first, what do you want for the Berkshires? In the last year, a lot has changed here, and it goes on from there. And then you don't need to use sentences. Something that I see is really effective is write how you talk instead of write how you were taught to write. Because a paragraph like this is what you might say to a friend, someone who you're speaking to on a one-on-one basis. You might be on a hike together and you'd be like, you know what, there's more development, there's more people on the trails. All this is happening while we're seeing the effect of climate change right before our very eyes. Are you going to contribute this season? If we use complete sentences there, it wouldn't work in the same personal one-to-one kind of way. And make sure there's an ask on every page. That's a neat little tactic to use. So we make sure that there's an ask on every single page in an appeal. And then down at the bottom, again, you don't need to use sentences. In fact, not using sentences can work to your advantage sometimes, because here's a line that's not a complete sentence, excuse me, but the ellipses at the end actually invites you to turn the page and keep reading. So we go to page number 2, which is the third page that people are reading. I don't have a ton of stuff to say about this page, excuse me. Here we are again telling the reader that they are part of the org because they are. And sometimes we talk about we know that we need to use bolding and italicizing and underlining these letters. It's a very effective fundraising strategy, but it can also be overdone. And sometimes there's questions about what should I bold and what should I underline? So what we do is we focus on bolding things that are needs, things that are solutions, and things that are calls to action. And then once we do that, we try to read over the whole thing and see if people get the gist of the letter by only reading the bolded text. And then we use italics and underlining for tonal emphasis to help people understand that we're speaking in a conversational tone. The way you might emphasize something when talking to a person, we use underlining and italics to help people hear that intonation in reading the letter. And then this is the third page of the same appeal. Sometimes we use different colors if we want to call out that something different. So here we're using green, which is not for intonation, and it's not a need, solution, or call to action, but instead it's just something we want people to see. Otherwise, it can get lost in the copy. We want them to know about our Berkshire Trails app. We want them to see that they can go learn about the high road at that particular URL. So we just use a different color to call it out. And then here again, find a way to ask on every page. We like to use big font. We use 4 pages so that we can use 14-point font. It makes it really easy to read. People open the letter and like, oh yeah, I'll read this, big type. It also just makes it really accessible for more people to read if the font is big. And then we use a lot of open space, as you see. We use really short paragraphs, a lot of white space. And that's there so that, people have space to think about the questions you ask, to sort of think about the statements you make in a deeper and more poetic way. So for example, and I think we've already covered this pretty well, but if you ask the question, like if this is a 1-sentence paragraph, what matters to you? That lands and sounds one way in the appeal letter. You can ask the very same question in an appeal letter like this. Let me tell you about some amazing news. It's an amazing achievement, but first, stop and think, what matters to you? I'm sure after all this news is revealed, you'll see that it actually fits perfectly with what matters to you, which is why I'm writing to you today. Like the actual question is totally buried in there, and it doesn't give the reader any time to think about what you've asked or relate to the organization, which is really like fundraising in person, because there's that trick fundraising in person, right? Like you're on your 3rd or 4th visit with someone, you've previewed that you'd like to ask them for a special gift, you're on the trail together, you're about to make the ask, you go ahead and make the ask. Would you please support Berkshire Natural Resources Council with a gift of $15,000 this year? And then you don't talk until they respond. It's the same sort of idea. Ask them questions in the letter and use that sort of in-person trick of creating space around the question so that they have a chance to respond in their mind. So this is about the way we think in appeal letters. Be really careful about the words we and our in appeal letters, because even though you might mean them to be inclusive of the reader, it's really easy for these to sound like you're making the reader and the donor separate from the organization. And at BNRC, without the donor, the organization wouldn't exist. So the donor is very much part of the organization. Here's an example. If we wrote, when you donate to BNRC, your gift allows us to make our reserves free to everyone, we have actually excluded the donor 3 times in this statement, because we have separated the donor from their gift, because we've told them that when you donate to BNRC, your gift makes the difference. So here the person is not making the difference, the gift is making the difference. So let the person make the difference rather than the gift. This actually illustrates the donor is not part of our org, because when they donate to BNRC, their gift allows us. So that would create a distinction between the donor and the organization, us being BNRC, to make our reserves, BNRC's reserves, free to everybody. So the donor doesn't actually have any sort of ownership or role in the reserves themselves. Instead, I would suggest something like this. When you donate, you conserve land, protect wildlife, preserve local farms, and make the Berkshire outdoors free to everybody. It is great to have you on the BNRC team. Will you help this season? Not only does this make the reader part of the organization, which they are, but it also connects their role in the organization. It is great to have you on the BNRC team with the ask that you're making. Will you help this season? And as I'm sure all of you know, the most important word in this sequence of sentences here is that it's constantly about you. However, even though we want to include the donor, we want to talk about you, we really want to understand what the donor is trying to accomplish through their support of the land trust. It is important that we communicate that the mission and the vision is being determined by staff members, board members. The donors are not determining the direction of the organization here. They're supporting the direction of the organization, but they're not determining it. There's some really good writing and thinking about this distinction between honoring the donor's role in the organization, yet making sure that the donor is not determining mission and vision through their gifts, by the community-centric fundraising group, which is a group that emerged 2 or 3 years ago and is aware of, but stands in contrast to donor-centric fundraising. And I think they're doing some really important stuff in making sure that organizations are best equipped to solve the problem that the nonprofits are trying to solve with the experts that they have on their team, staff, and board, without falling into a lot of the unfortunate pitfalls that happen in philanthropy with donors sort of determining the direction of an organization. So I commend you to community-centric fundraising. And Doug, I know you're familiar with that too. If you have a moment, if you could pop their homepage in the chat, that would be terrific. So that's the letter. What do we have in the chat, or what do you all have for questions that you want to raise your hand and speak out at this point? Either questions or your own ideas. Like maybe this has made you think of something that you do that's really successful that you want to share with the group.
All right, Rich, we had a question from Kathy at the Littleton Conservation Trust earlier, asking if you worry about, quote, hassling people with so many appeals.
I don't worry about it. And the only reason I don't worry about it is because I've tried it and it's proven not to be a problem. I think it's important to know your people and to be responsive to their requests and to what you know about them. So Berkshire Natural Resources Council is big enough that I can't talk to everybody individually every year, but it's small enough where I generally know like all the names, right? Especially $250 or more. So, you know, to do appeals this way, it's not easy. You got to put in some work. You know, I spend 6 to 10 hours with each mailing list before it goes out. And you'll see a little bit more why on the next few slides. But the reason I do that is because I'll sort the list several different ways before we send it over to the mail house to have these things replicated and put out in the world. And one of the ways I'll sort it is by like portfolio manager, and then I'll sort it by last gift. And so like if I see last gift, $2,500 1 month ago, and I just went on a hike with them 2 weeks ago, like they're not getting the appeal. I just delete them from the list and take them out. So that's respecting what I know about the community. And then some people do write back from time to time and they're like, please only send me the thing in December. And so we just account for that in our database. We have a way of flagging people so they only get the one in December. But in terms of like everybody, you know, it's not a problem. I have found that people give multiple times a year when asked multiple times a year, because a lot of the gifts that people are making, which are helpful, are $50 gifts and $100 gifts and $200 gifts, and they're giving these out of salary. And you know, people can give these sorts of gifts out of salary in April, and then they can give them again in October. And something that one of my mentors told me that has served me very well over the years is don't make a decision for your donor or prospective donor. Give them the opportunity and let them make the decision, and that served me pretty well.
All right, we've got a number of questions that are along a similar theme of, you know, is there an ideal length of the letter? 4 pages seems quite long, and some of our donors might even think that that's wasteful. Is there an ideal length? 1 page seems effective as well. Kind of there's a lot of interest around that topic.
Okay, so if you're getting the results that you want out of a 1-page letter, do a 1-page letter. I meant to say this at the beginning. I don't fancy myself as the ultimate guru, and everything that I say here is the absolute best practice, because as I'm sure many of you have experienced, there's sort of a general body of knowledge in fundraising, but then the actual practice of what works at any given organization is different. And you sort of have to understand what's the right mix of so-called best practices and the reality of my organization. So if you're doing a 1-page letter and you're seeing 5 to 1, 6 to 1, 7 to 1 results out of your letter, that's fantastic. Like, roll with it. The reason I like a 4-page letter and that we're using one at BNRC is we're having success with it. We feel like the space that the 4-page letter provides enables us to do accessibility things like having bigger font. It enables us to write in the way we want to without having to jam all the copy together. And the return on investment is coming back to BNRC. So, you know, we're getting the 5 to 1, 6 to 1 return. We're bringing in new donors all the time with this sort of style. And so we're happy with it. But if you're seeing results with a different style, like that's okay. And you could test it one time. About being wasteful, I find that over the course of my fundraising career, I've raised more money with 4-page letters than 1-page letters. And in the case of conservation, that extra money raised relative to the resources spent goes back into conservation. So I'm okay with it. But everyone has to make their own decision with respect to that quandary.
Okay. Got one other question that came in earlier from Katie at Hilltown, saying that she noticed that you don't have any photos in the letter itself. Why do you use images on the envelope and not on the letter?
It's the reason that we do this at BNRC is because more can be communicated on the envelope, in my opinion, with the pictures. And more can be communicated inside the letter with words. So knowing that the back of the envelope is like this great real estate to communicate something, I'd rather use pictures and that sort of Zen vision poem to say what I want to say on the outside of the envelope, and then spend that space on the pages using a big font message that has like super short paragraphs and open-ended questions, and that sort of formatting to really engage with the reader on the inside after they understand a taste of what they're going to read and being reminded of their relationship to the organization through pictures on the outside of the package.
Rich, do you have time for a couple other questions, or do you want to move on to the next segment?
I should probably keep track of time, eh? Yeah, we can do another question.
Okay. There was a question. When suggesting 6 letters a year, I assume that includes a year-end appeal and a renewal letter. Are there different subjects or topics that are highlighted regularly in others?
Yes, the question we always start with is, why should someone give this season? And so the content is always different. And so we, at Berkshire Natural Resources Council, we think about things like, in terms of social identities, are we including everybody in this message? In terms of regional identities, because Berkshire goes from Vermont down to Connecticut, we think about, do we have some North County? Do we have some Central County? Do we have some South County stuff in here? Are we talking about wildlife? Are we talking about kids? And we just try to answer all of those questions. And then in light of all of those questions, ask ourselves, what are we trying to accomplish now and in the next 6 months ahead? And let's tell stories about that. Let's tell stories about the reader that relate to the things that we're trying to accomplish in terms of outcomes in the next 6 months. So it's a very timely message all the time. It's not the same thing over and over and over again.
Okay. And then there was another question, are we discussing snail mail appeals, and how does that compare to the email appeals?
Yeah, thanks. I'll get to that later.
Great.
All right. So, okay to chug on?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to chug on just to make sure we get to at least most of this here. Now we get to reply devices. So these are direct mail appeals going in snail mail. And here is a picture of the front of our most recent reply device. What we do here is we are putting a call to action right in the middle of the hero image with an ellipses to invite people to actually flip to the other side. We're making sure that we use a seasonal photo that speaks to mission and place, and we're reinforcing that vision Zen thing at the bottom here. So people sort of have an idea like, I choose the Berkshires. Right behind that hero text is a hero image that reinforces, this is the place that I'm choosing, and underneath, this is what I'm doing it for. So there's a lot communicated here, and we allow this to have the space to be beautiful. A lot of people might say that this is wasted space, but I think a lot is communicated here, and I think it's okay to communicate in images in just a few words. So these are about, these are a reply card. It's about a third of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. On the back side, it looks like this. This is a little more jammed up than what I want it to be, but we're work in progress. Now you see the headline on the back is a response to the hero call out on the front. So on the front, it was, I choose the Berkshires, ... flip it over. I choose the Berkshires, ! Like they're really choosing it. And here is, if you just want to know something technical, like one technical thing that you can do to raise more money that is not about relationship, it's just about this works to raise more money, is create an ask string that is specific to the recipient of each individual letter. And so one of the reasons I spend 6 to 8 hours with the spreadsheet before it goes to the mail house with the mailing list on it is I use formulas and my own brain, sometimes like one by one for the top 250, 300 people, to actually create an individual ask string for each person that I'm sending this to. Because if someone's last gift was $500, I don't want to show them an ask string that asks them for $50, $100, or $500. I want to show them an ask string that starts at $500 at minimum, maybe $525 because I want to bump them up a little, and then throw 700 at them and throw 800 at them. So it would be like 525, 700, 800. That would be their ask string. But if someone's last gift was $50, I'd show them an ask string that says $60, $100, $150. And that alone, I've played that trick at like 4 different fundraising shops. It has always worked for me. If you individualize the ask strings, I will go out a limb and say you will raise more money. It just happens. It has always happened for me. Down here, this isn't so much about relationships or art. This is about keeping your gift recorder happy. If your gift recorder is someone other than you, in which case you might be keeping yourself happy here. We pre-print the database ID number, name, address line, city, state, zip, and email right on each person's card because we're individualizing their ask string anyway. So it's already a custom card. It's really low friction for the donor, and it makes for a very happy gift recorder in your office. Or we're always looking for opportunities for people to skip sending something back in the mail and just taking care of it, because usually people have their phone right next to them. So we try to do a QR code, we try to do a URL, and just make it really easy for people to go from paper to the internet to complete their gift. Here's another thing we do. Because of, so BNRC segments its appeal, and because of our bandwidth, we only use 3 segments, but in using 3 segments, it's very effective. So we have a donor segment, we have a non-donor segment, and we have a special handling segment. So the donors get those individualized ask strings. The non-donors, this is a non-donor card. It doesn't look that different from the donor card. But the non-donors, we have no giving history to go off of. So the amounts that we plug in are $50, $100, and $250 for non-donors. The reason we choose those amounts is because our analysis of general BNRC giving history is the first gift that someone makes is typically $50 or $100. So we just throw those 2 amounts out there, try to acquire people, and then work the relationship from there. For the special handling group, these are people, like we all have people who, you know, like you've got your people where if you exported all of your donors onto a spreadsheet and you organized by last gift or lifetime giving, like there would be a place where the amounts change. You know, you're going to have people that are giving tons of money, tons of money, tons of money, tons of money. And then like you can noticeably see, okay, and here's everyone who's, you know, chipping in. All of those gifts are important, but our special handling lot are those people who are giving BNRC $10,000 or $35,000 or $50,000 at a time. Many of these people I have a one-on-one relationship with. Many of these people are board members. Many of these people are people who have donated lands to BNRC. It would be silly of us to send them a card in the mail that says, yes, please count me in for my contribution of $100,000, $150,000, or $250,000. Like that's just, it's tone deaf. A lot of times we send these to board members so that they know what's going out in the mail, but like we're not actually expecting this to be the solicitation mechanism for these people. And so that's why we have a special handling lot. Also in the special handling lot, and this is another thing that I do to sort of amp up the show them you know who they are. Seasonally, I throw into the special handling lot everyone who's made a gift in the last 2 months, so to speak. You know, like you have to sort of just if this is going out on November 15th, like how far back do I want to go? September 15th, that sounds good. But if people have given a gift that season, I put them in the special handling lot. And then I get these sorts of sticky notes printed. So this is a regular Post-it note size thing. I'm not trying to fool them. Like, obviously it's a printed note, but I'm trying to sort of like find that middle ground between having a one-on-one relationship and just showing them that I know who they are in a mass appeal. So this one right here is a sticky note that says, I just have to move your beautiful faces here. Thank you again for your recent donation. Consider the enclosed an FYI on the latest news from BNRC and all that is happening thanks to your help and generosity. It's great to have you on the team. Happy autumn, gratefully rich BNRC. So if I was sending something out, November 15th and they had given October 28th, I would put them in the special handling lot. I would put this Post-it note on their appeal so that they know that I know that they just gave. It's another way for me to thank them too, but also like, hey, maybe they're feeling generous and maybe they'll give again. And sometimes they actually do. So I do this with recent donors. I do this with land donors, longtime donors. And, you can set your own calculus. Like if at BNRC, if somebody has given $10,000 or more lifetime, they also get something like this on their letter. But you can choose what the right sort of people are for you to include these sort of sticky notes on your letters, if that's something you want to do. And this goes on the letter, not the reply device. I know it's sort of in the reply device section here, but I stick it on the letter because I have the mail house send out the donor letters and the non-donor letters. Those go out from the mail house. But I have the special handling envelope sent to the office. I throw the sticky notes in and then I send them out in the mail. So that's reply device. Questions from the chat or live about reply device? All right.
They're not a question, but a comment. Here, go with the question first. Approximately how many do you handwrite messages on?
I handwrite messages on probably 40 to 50 letters. The rest are all sticky notes. So the special handling lot that I have sent to the office for Berkshire Natural Resources Council usually winds up being like 300 to 350 letters. The ones that I'm not handwriting, I can sticky note in about half a day. And then, the 40 or 50 do take another day for me to get out. So it takes some planning and it takes some being okay with just tedious work. Not tedious because it's boring, but tedious because there's no other way to do it except to just sit down and write the letters. You just have to make space for it. And it's worked really well for BNRC.
Okay, and kind of along that line, the comment was great ideas, but many of us are at small orgs without a dedicated development person. Which of these tricks would you recommend smaller shops can use, taking into account our limited hours? Example, cannot spend 8 hours reviewing a list.
Yeah, great question. And my general answer is whatever you find helpful and you think that you can apply from this presentation, that's great. Apply it. And do translate it to your organization, because I recognize that no organization is going to be able to or even want to apply all of these tips that I'm throwing out there. I'm telling you a bunch of things that would work well for BNRC because I just wanted to share the experience of our success with you in case that like a few things work for you. So, take what works, leave on the shelf what doesn't work. If you're trying to make a cost benefit analysis and say like, okay, I want to do some of these, but which ones would you really recommend are the best? I really recommend if you can find a way to making your ask strings individual, even though that's really science, that's not art. If you can individualize your ask strings, you will raise more money. So that would be the first thing that I would do if I could do anything. But if that's not within the realm of what you think can be accomplished by the bandwidth at your organization, understanding that you want to make the experience of receiving this letter as personal as possible, that's also important. And you can sort of take the things that I've shared here and you can translate them in your own way. So, maybe you have all the letters printed and you want to personalize these 50. Or maybe you want to get your board together and you give them each 10 and you spend an hour or two personalizing letters as a group. But I would say personalize the ask strings or personalize the experience of receiving and reading the letter as the top things that you can do to get more out of your appeals, because really it's about a personal relationship.
Then it's a question of what do you think of a detachable reply card versus a separate piece of paper? I think that may make a customized ask string easier for smaller organizations.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I've done that at other organizations where I've used an 8.5 by 11 letter. And then the bottom section is still as big as a reply card would be. So I guess it winds up being like 8.5 by 14, but the bottom part is a tear off. Or you could do 8.5 by 11 with the bottom part as a tear off. Like, again, whatever works for you. Like if you're finding something in here that's useful, just translate it for what you can accomplish. This is not about doing all of this at once. This is just about giving you a bunch of ideas and helping you make decisions about how to improve your program, because that's what any of us are just trying to do every season.
And then a follow-up to the question about how many handwrite messages there are was a question of how many do you hand to your ED to write notes on?
About 40.
There were a couple of questions earlier. They should be pretty quick to answer. Whether you're printing your 4-page letters double-sided, and are they letter-sized or 4-panel piece?
Yeah, we do print them double-sided, and I'm not sure what the person means by letter-sized or what did you say, 4-sided? They are double-sided, so it's 2 sheets of paper. It's 2 standard sheets of paper, front and back.
I think that probably covers it.
Okay. So I'm going to move on to get to one more thing, and we do have enough time to get through this here before the 4:15. Thank you all for hanging with me. This is a totally optional thing. It's just an idea that I wanted to tell you about that's been working well for BNRC. And this is including a buck slip or like a paper flyer into the appeal package. So you have the outer envelope, you have a reply device, you have a return envelope, which can be the simplest thing. I don't think that there's any need to fuss over the return envelope. And then there's the buck slip, which is just a 2-sided thing that BNRC uses to go deeper on specific messages that we want to highlight this season. So this particular one here came out, in November. We wanted people to be thinking about all the ways they can give because we're in the middle of the November-December season. And so we wanted to make sure people were understanding, don't just think about cash, think about stock, think about giving from your IRA, think about your will. This is like a planned giving buck slip. In every case here, so up top, we've got a call to action and a solution for the donor, right? Give generously to conserve the Berkshires while saving on taxes. We're solving for the donor's desire to save on taxes. We ask this listening question, is one of these right for you? And each of these 3 things, transfer appreciated stock, give directly from your IRA, protect the future of the Berkshires, and your will. Each one of these has a call to action and it has a solution. It shows you that by transferring appreciated stock, you can help protect the ecological integrity of the Berkshires, and then a way to take action. And then always, the stuff is always couched in gratitude. That works really well for BNRC. And, going back to tell a story, for this particular piece, I'm thinking about stocks, I'm thinking about IRA giving. So I'm thinking about a person or a couple that might look like this. But if I wanted to hit the bequest thing harder, if I wanted to hit the will thing harder, I might actually feature millennials in this picture because, millennials being about 40 years old now, they might be thinking about things like, creating, living estates, living wills and things like that. And then here's another one we did. This was actually the other side of the planned giving buck slip. We had this promotion going last December where can we thank you with a BNRC hat? And one of the things I wanted to emphasize here is that, again, talk to like one person, like a friend. We're being kind of cheeky here. This hat will keep you comfortable and safe in the Berkshire outdoors during chilly September nights, autumn, winter, fall, spring, second winter, and mud season, right? So really try to regionalize who we're speaking to. And then, I missed one point. There's two ways to take action here, right? Like you can use the URL or you can use the QR code. I actually don't really love transactional giving. It's something we do once in a while to help acquire some first-time donors, but transactional giving isn't something I like to make a habit of. I think it's really important for people to experience giving to an organization and essentially receiving nothing in return except thanks and gratitude. But I make exceptions to my own rules. And then, here was another one that we did. There was a really interesting challenge that actually I think is going again this year. There's an organization in San Francisco called Half My Donor Advised Fund, Half My DAF. The way their challenge works is if you have a donor who promises to give half of their donor advised fund to nonprofits within the year, then you will be eligible for a match from the organization Half My DAF for your donor having done that. Half My DAF thinks that there's way too much money locked up in donor advised funds. They want that money to flow to the nonprofits and not be locked up in donor advised funds. And this is a challenge that they have come up with to help spring that money and support nonprofits. So we made it the feature of one of our buck slips and picked up a few gifts through this challenge. And what I like about this challenge is it's actually a real challenge. I really don't like the challenges where you have a donor who's going to give you a sum of money anyways. And so they say, let's make it a challenge, wink, wink. And then we go out and we say, your gift will be doubled. But like, really, we're going to get the money anyways. This is an actual challenge where if like people don't empty half of their DAF and send some of that to BNRC, BNRC is actually not getting the money. I like challenges that function like this. This is the back. I did this one in a total rush. It's way too scrunched together. There's way too much going on there. But what I wanted to point out about this is, again, it's drawing people out with listening questions at the top. Do you have a donor advised fund? Would you like to help BNRC qualify for a matching gift of up to $100,000 from the 1.6 million nationwide Half My DAF challenge? It asks listening questions and provides a call to action and a way to respond. Are you intrigued, interested? Visit Half My DAF to learn more. It shows them that you know who they are. Like in this, we're trying to expand the reach of this particular challenge. So we're talking to people who have a DAF, but we're also talking to people whom they might also be trying to get interested in giving. Like there's certainly a persona out there where a couple has a DAF, they have adult children, they're at a point in their lives where they want their children to start taking responsibility for the family giving. This is a great way where, when delivered around Thanksgiving, this buck slip can land on the Thanksgiving dinner table and people can have a dessert conversation about how they would like to give from their DAF in a new way to support organizations now, rather than keeping that money locked up in the donor advised fund. So those are some buck slip ideas. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions about buck slips, again, which are totally optional, like that's total bonus points. I just wanted to plant the idea because, if it works for you, great. And if it doesn't, don't worry about it. Any questions on buck slips? All right, well, I'll keep rolling then. This is the last part here. I just wanted to emphasize, we've talked about appeal letters, right? That is the title of this particular session. And so we focused entirely on a direct mail piece in this, but it's not just an appeal, it's a drive, right? We have email sequences that support these things. And I think it's important to think of them as sequences. When I'm doing the November, December drive, and an appeal letter is going out and the appeal letter is landing like right before Thanksgiving, I write myself out a calendar and I usually have about 6 emails on that calendar from November 1st to December 31st. And I know what all of those emails are. I know who they're going to. I know what the content of those emails is going to be. And in many cases, the content of those emails are repurposed bits from the direct mail piece that we sent by snail mail, because you're going to say like 8 or 10 things that you're up to. in that letter that you're sending out. And so you can use those as email bits, as social media bits, as you make a drive out of your appeal letter, instead of just making it this one and done thing that you chuck in the mail and see what you get back. Because you all know it's about multi-channel. Like if people get the letter and then they run into the thing on Facebook, and then they go to your hiking event, and then they see the thing in their email, like this all works together to bring the gifts in. So, social media, same, repurpose bits. I almost always couch the social media stuff that I do for fundraising in gratitude. I say things like, thanks to BNRC donors, the Thomas and Palmer Brook Reserve in Great Barrington features an accessible trail. We wouldn't have this kind of access to the outdoors in BNRC without donors. If you want to join the fun and be a donor, hit this link. And don't worry if your social media posts about your active appeal seem to be avoided like the plague. Like over the years, I see like program posts getting like, let's say your program posts get like 30 likes, 30 likes, 30 likes. It is very normal for them, the fundraising post, to get 2 likes. It's okay. People are seeing it. Events. So, same thing. How is your event wrap? Like you get people together, you're about to go on a trail. If you have an appeal out in the world in May, June, what is it from your May, June appeal that's out in the world that you're reiterating at your wrap? Hey, we're going to hit this trail. Thanks to BNRC donors, trails like this are possible. We're focusing on blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. So glad to have you here. Let's hit the trail. And then, you also got to work your portfolio to make your appeals do what they can do. Appeals are great ways to remind your major donors that it is a time of year when they could give. But because they're your major donors, you also have to be in touch with them one-on-one. So you can play these things off of each other. You can call someone and say, hey, you're going to get this thing in the mail. Let me know what you think of it. Or you can send the thing in the mail and get in touch with them by email or go on a hike with them or something and be like, so did you see that thing in the mail? Like make these things work in conjunction. And of course, as you all know, you need to have a person by person strategy for your top 10, 25, 50, whatever it is for you. Like you have to know person by person what you're doing each season with that person to hold that relationship in a way that's appropriate for your org. So the whole point is why me and why this season? And that's what all of this is structured to answer. The relationship stuff, the open space, the short sentences, the questions, the reply device design, the buck slips. It's all about why me, why this season. That's what we want people thinking about. And I think that's the last slide. Yep. So that's the program, Raise More Money, Reach More Hearts. You can get at BNRC or me on Twitter that way. My name is Rich Montone, Director of Development, Berkshire Natural Resources Council. I also do a thing called Mountain Heart Giving, which is advising for fundraising, advising philanthropists. And I've gotten into crypto philanthropy, which I think is very interesting. So if you're interested in accepting crypto gifts and you want someone to talk to about that, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. It's an interesting emerging technology in the philanthropy world. But that's the program. Any questions, either from the chat or if people, I'm going to unshare so I can actually see all of you. Any questions from the chat or just what people want to ask live?
Rich, there was a question in the chat about, have you done any mailings or produced materials specific to required minimum distributions from IRAs? And do you have any tips on that topic?
Yeah, I have not. Yes, actually. I'm thinking of both the buck slip that I just showed you, but I'm also thinking about a postcard that we sent. And the postcard was only about donating from your IRA. And a lot of the same tips apply. So if you're thinking of a postcard, the front of the postcard, if you will, I mean, who knows what the front and the back of the postcard are, right? But one side of the postcard, big hero image that tried to communicate as much about mission as possible. Just a few words, a leading question. Other side of the postcards, details about the opportunity to give, why that solves something for Berkshire Conservation, why that solves something for the donor, and a way to take action, both by offering my email address, a QR code to a website where people could take action, or a web URL in case people wanted to type it in themselves. But the same sorts of things apply. Try to be as personal as possible, try to ask open-ended questions. And if anybody wants to talk more about that kind of piece, I'm happy to connect out of this meeting and find a time to chat about it on the phone or Zoom or whatever.
And then,
and I guess I will also mention that BNRC utilizes a service called Free Will, which offers tools for people to do things like create bequests and give from their IRAs and things like that. I find it most useful for helping people to create bequests. I don't find their stock and their IRA giving tools as useful because I find that financial advisors that people have are usually sufficient to the task of executing an IRA gift or making a stock gift.
Great. We have another question of, can you list your top 5 tips from the presentation for increasing the success of your appeal?
So top 5 tips. Variable ask strings that vary according to the person who's receiving the letter. Personalizing the letter, both in terms of writing to a particular person, but also doing things like having a special handling lot where you can include notes to people where it'd be kind of weird not to comment to them personally when you're sending them something in the mail. Using a reply device that gives people a way that they can go from paper to internet. You want to create as little friction as possible for your donors to make a gift. Those are the top 3. I'd have to look at the rest of the presentation to know what 4 and 5 are. But really, I guess overall, the idea is like just try to make the letter a representation of what you could do if you were standing there in person with every single one of your donors. For BNRC, that's about 1,600 people who are donors and about 3,500 people who we mail. So just try to be as down to earth and smart but personal as possible in the way that you write. All right, well, I have some thank yous. I want to thank all of you for being here. You could have done anything right now, but you chose this. And I was supposed to have a buddy doing this with me, so we'd have like some contrast of voice, and that person was ultimately not able to be here, so you had to listen to me for 75 minutes. So thank you for being here, and thank you for listening. I appreciate it. I want to again thank Doug and Jen, who volunteered to help do all of the tech while I ran through the slides. And of course, thank you to our sponsors, Mass Audubon, the trustees of reservations, and my organization, Berkshire Natural Resources Council, which is sponsoring this particular program, this particular workshop. And thank you for all you do for the outdoors in Massachusetts and in the Northeast. It matters a lot to so many people. As you all know, it takes hundreds and hundreds of years, conservatively speaking, to create these sorts of landscapes. It takes one season to ruin them. So I really appreciate all the work that you're doing to make that happen across the state of Massachusetts and within the Northeast.